Welcome along to episode 2 of the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and joined as ever by Matt Tombs and Donn McClean. Matt, we had a good lot of comments in, a lot of questions, which we'll hopefully get to from episode 1. But it's just great being back on the Cheltenham Trail, isn't it?
It is, and we're just building into the sort of kind of final trial season. We were just talking off air there about the position, particularly with the novice hurdlers this year. Very embryonic, and the next 2-3 weeks are going to be absolutely fascinating. For that could be some real value in the Cheltenham Festival anti-post markets.
Yeah, Don, you've covered many Irish racing seasons, and we have had seasons where Willie takes a while to get going in terms of the Grade 1 novice hurdlers, sometimes chasers as well. And then even come Cheltenham, he's got a lot of the favourites. So it can turn in the next few weeks.
Oh yeah, like we were again as we were discussing off air there, the Dublin Racing Festival. It's not a given that the Willie Mullins #1 is going to win every race. But yeah, it's a different season this year, and a couple of the Willie Mullins big horses that were maybe a wee bit later getting out than had been the case, or than we had anticipated. And Gordon Elliott's had a fantastic season so far. Gavin Cromwell's flying. Henry de Bromhead obviously going really well as well, and yeah, no, it's been an interesting season. Just, even yesterday at Punchestown, good to see a few of the smaller trainers having winners as well. So, it's been a great season. But as Matt said, it's building up now again, as it has been throughout the season, just ramping up. And the next couple of weeks, including the Dublin Racing Festival, they're going to be hugely enjoyable and hugely informative as well.
Yeah, the cancellations in England and Great Britain in general has given those good Irish jumps, racing cards, particularly on a Sunday, some real airtime on racing TV. And there's been excellent coverage. Let's hope it continues, because the theme, I think, from everyone, even a lot of people that give out about horse racing this year, and particularly the jumps, it's been a great season. Let's hope it continues, because the best is hopefully yet to come. Before we get going, if you are, or wherever you're watching or listening, if you hit that like button and follow or subscribe completely for free wherever you get your podcasts, it's the best way, no cost way of supporting the podcast and what we do here at Matchbook. And a busy week throughout on the Matchbook podcast. Just to give you an example, we've got midweek Premier League podcast recorded yesterday, the Cheltenham Trail today, NFL podcast Wednesday, horse racing podcast Thursday, previewing the Clarence House in particular, where Matt's got a strong fancy there. Hopefully we'll cover a hit with him here. And then Friday, of course, we're going back with the weekend Premier League podcast. So check out all our social channels and insights.matchbook.com as well. And as ever, check out the Matchbook Betting Exchange. We see a lot of new players on the horse racing market. So while we're checking those markets out, particularly that 5 to 10 minutes before race, let's get started. So last week we covered the Christmas hurdles. There was a lot in that. And if you haven't listened to episode 1, I'd urge you to go back right now, listen to it, and then jump in here for episode 2, where we're going to focus on the chases. There are 1 or 2 chases as well to cover since Christmas as well. Matt, we'll start with the King George. Okay, so I want you to hit the trend and your thoughts on the race. You have a couple of trends here, actually. What a fantastic race. I watched this race at Leopardstown. Didn't see LA France getting beat, to be honest with you, right up until he was. So I guess in that sense was fantastic ride from Paul Townend. But what's your reading from the race in a view to the couple of Cheltenham Festival races, which is, of course, the Ryanair, and starting with maybe the Gold Cup?
Yeah, really enjoyable King George. I was at Kempton. It was a fantastic race. Loads of potential stars taking on some established Grade 1 horses. Banbridge, you said, was given plenty of ground to make up by confident Paul Townend. Did it in style. A bit visually, he was slightly flattered by Le Francais being steadied into the last and losing momentum. Banbridge was a Martin Pike winner 3 seasons ago. They're normally embryonic stayers, so he could easily improve again for the Gold Cup trial. But Connection seem open-minded about what distance to campaign Matt at the Spring, and he is very ground dependent, so he's not an anti-post proposition. He's a top-class horse on a sound surface. Whether it's the Gold Cup, Ryanair, or another race, he'll need respecting wherever he turns up if he gets his ground. But the recent record of King George winners is not great. The last 11 to have run in the Gold Cup have all been beaten. No King George winner has ever contested the Ryanair. So he's much more of a speed horse than a lot of King George winners, more stamina doubts. But even so, I'd be personally a little bit disappointed if he turned up in that, having won a King George in such style. Le Francais in and out, he's a bleeder, but very good on his day, loves Kempton. Maybe if he'd been gunned into the last, if he'd come up, he'd have held on. But I thought Banbridge was coming to win the race anyway. Le Francais was second on merit. Noel George says they don't want to run again on heavy Auteuil. So France's loss might be our gain, more likely to run at the festival. He doesn't look like a Gold Cup horse to me. So Ryanair seems the obvious race. Front runners have an excellent record in it. 4 of the 17 Grade 1 renewals been won by horse making, all 7 of the other 13 by horse making, a lot of the running. But the Champion Chase is a possibility the way he jumps. He hasn't run over shorter than 2 miles 6 since his chasing debut September 2023. Personally, I'd run him in the Game Spirit and see how he copes with that test and then make the decision from there. It's a rarity for a horse campaigned over staying distances to win the Champion Chase, but sizing Europe, especially one-man show, it can be done. And if horse is going to do it, Ile Francais looks a candidate for all he'd need to show he handles the undulations of Prestbury Park. Rest were well beaten off. Spillane's Tower, a little disappointing. Perhaps the ground was too lively for him. First run on good ground. Although he won on yielding at the Punchestown Festival, they water heavily there. The test in the King George, a flat, speedy track, typically strong, unrelenting gallop, quite different from almost any other staying chase. Lots of top-notchers don't take to it. Looks like Trouble, Imperial Commander spring to mind. They both went on to win the Gold Cup, but often good horses who disappoint in the King George get diverted to the Ryanair. Runners in the Ryanair, 8 from 35, 49% profit, having finished 266p, 5527 at Kempton. Spillane's Tower's only been entered in the Ryanair. Perhaps connections go the Imperial Commander route, Gold Cup next year. He shouldn't be written off because he's disappointed here. And finally, one I give a bit of a pass to is Corbett's Cross, for whom this didn't look a suitable test. Whilst he's a fast horse for a stayer, he isn't a natural jumper, and best with time to get himself organised at his fences. Predictably, the rat-a-tat-tat nature of the King George didn't suit, never got into a rhythm. So I'd have thought the tempo of the Savills would have suited him better. He's best judged after another run. If he flops again, he could easily end up in the stayers hurdle, but he might be one for a big handicap in the spring.
Yeah, and been tipped up in a few places for the Grand National as an example, and also other races throughout the season. So all not lost with Corbett's Cross. Don, I would say A, you're probably the founding member of the Banbridge fan club, and B, you were on the Matchbook horse racing podcast, tipped him up very confidently. I think it was your best bet throughout the Christmas race and for the King George. So was it exactly as you drew it up?
Yeah, there was never a sweat. He was always going to get there. I know, like Matt's covered an awful lot of it there, and I agree with a lot of what Matt said. Fascinating stats. The most fascinating for me is the fact that no King George winner has ever run in a Ryanair chase. That to me is a phenomenal stat. But look, a lot of it, Matt covered a lot of it. Spillane's Tower, he's not even been entered in the Gold Cup. I definitely give him a pass. And yeah, the Ryanair chase this year, like he's only just gone 7, so he's a very young horse. He hasn't had a lot of racing. You can see why they just remove the temptation, not enter him in the Gold Cup. And Junior Mangan said, yeah, all being well, we go for the Ryanair, hopefully. And you know, he probably does need a cut in the ground at least. But look, connections are they're patient, so we'll see how he goes. Corbett's Cross, yeah, like it's easy in hindsight, but it was the King George test. Like it's unrelenting momentum, pace, jumping, and Corbett's Cross, like his jumping just hasn't been good this season so far. So it wasn't really a test that was going to suit him, and like a better test for him. Again, he's going to have to jump a bit better. He's going to be a top class chaser. So I give him a pass for this and see how he goes next. L'Empresse, by contrast, wasn't even entered in the Ryanair chase. I think there was talk beforehand that he would be a Ryanair chase horse. Ile Francais, yeah, like he's a Ryanair horse, isn't he? Like he's pacey, but as Matt said, he's so good at Kempton. He was brilliant in the Cato Star Chase last season and ran a massive race in the King George this season. Cheltenham, obviously, we know it's a very different test to Kempton, so he has to prove that he can handle it. I know Auteuil, it's flat as well, so he has to prove that he can handle Cheltenham. But Banbridge, yeah, like a lot of the Banbridge performance for me, he proved that he stayed. Like his last 4 furlongs were way faster than the next fastest. He was 55.1 seconds according to Race IQ, 2.2 seconds faster than the next fastest for the last 4 furlongs. And very interestingly, the next fastest was Ile Francais. So it wasn't like he went a million miles an hour and collapsed. He was the second fastest through the last 4 furlongs. And as Matt said, he did lose ground and momentum at the final fence. But it wasn't that Banbridge picked up the pieces after the pace collapsed. He had to go and win it. He had to see out the 3 mile trip. And look, he's a Martin Pipe winner. That's a race that, as Matt said, it fosters. It's 2.5 miles. It's normally a test of stamina. It's been won by Sur de Champs and Kilolta Vic and Don Poli, I think, won a Galloping des Champs on it. So it's been won by early doors, a Galway plate winner. It's been won by horses who go on to be staying chasers. And Banbridge, like his dam's a half sister to Major Monarchy, who was won over 4 miles and over 3 miles as well for Nigel Twiston-Davis. So there's lots of evidence in his pedigree and his performances that say that actually he could stay the Gold Cup trip. He could even improve for a Gold Cup trip, but he has that pace to win an Arkle trial at Cheltenham and to win a Martin Pipe hurdle and to win a champion chase at Punchestown as well, where he needed every yard of it to get up and beat Captain Guinness there in the spring. So look, as Matt said, he needs good ground. We know that he's disappointed on soft ground in the Ryanair chase, but his other 2 runs at Cheltenham in the Arkle trial and in the Martin Pipe hurdle, he won both of them. So he's a Cheltenham horse as well, and like super ride by Paul Townend on the day I was feeling sorry for JJ7, and then he came out and won 2 Grade 1s over here on Solness and home by the Lee. So as we covered before, Dan, brilliant week for Joseph O'Brien and his team. But no, I think Banbridge could be a real player in the Gold Cup as well.
Yeah, and fascinating where Ile Francais goes there. Obviously has the pace as well for 2 miles, so you've got maybe 3 options for the Cheltenham Festival, and he would definitely add something to the festival. Let's move on to Savills Chase, and Don, we'll start with you here, because the one day I didn't go out of the 4 days at Leopardstown was this day. And I guess if someone, it's like, would you not consider the 28th? I just watched it at home, and the reception, I was very jealous of everyone there at Leopardstown, because it reminded me of Fahim winning there, where I was lucky to be there. And I think Fahim was February 2020, just before COVID. So I think it's probably the best reception since then at Leopardstown, albeit there has been a lot of great ones. He's an absolute superstar, and that I thought that was almost as good as we've seen him throughout his whole career, which is unbelievable to get that performance in Ireland at Christmas.
Yeah, I know all of that, Dan. Like the reception was brilliant. People were mentioning Fahim, Honeysuckle, Hurricane Fly. Those receptions where they come back in and you have a bank of people waiting for the winner when he comes back in. And as what you could see what it meant to Paul Townend as well. And Paul Townend has ridden so many Grade 1 Gold Cup winners, etc. He really seemed to get a great kick out of this. And it's like Galloping des Champs, exactly the same as last year. He had to go and do it again. He was beaten in the John Durkin chase last year. Came on and won the Savills chase last year by 23 lengths. It wasn't 23 lengths this year, but I think it was equally emphatic. Like he really picked up from the final fence again and went away. Again, superbly judged ride by Paul Townend. Very different to the Banbridge ride where he came from behind and judged his run to get up and beat Ile Francais. This time he led from the front. A finishing speed percentage of 110% tells you that he just dictated a nice sedate pace to suit his own horse, and he was able to pick up off it. Factify was a bit keen early on, and probably made 1 or 2 little errors around on the way around, which didn't help him. But I think on the day, Dan, nothing would have beaten Galloping des Champs. He was so good. His final furlong was 55.84 seconds, which was the second quickest of the whole Leopardstown meeting, and that was after running over 3 miles. The final furlong was actually faster than his second last furlong. So, and look, he's a superstar. He's turned 9. He's a dual Gold Cup winner. He's bidding to join Cottage Rake and Arkle and Best Mate as the only triple Gold Cup winners since Golden Miller won his 5. And he's an even money shot or thereabouts to go and win it, and you can't dispute that. He's the one they have to beat. We know that he's in this form similar to last year. He's rolling on to the Cheltenham Gold Cup. We know that he goes well at Cheltenham as well. He's won 3 of his races there and fell in the turners at the final fence when he was well clear. So look, it's just brilliant. He's brilliant for racing as well, Dan. As you said, the reception that he got and the accolades that he got afterwards. So yeah, hopefully he continues to reign.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to spend too long because we've spoken, honestly, this time last year, you spoke at length about Galloping des Champs being a bit different to modern day staying chases in that they run him a lot. And that's to do with the ownership, I'd say, not just Willie Mullins, but I guess it's the type of horse he is. And we get to see him at tracks like Punchestown where he's not always at his best. And we see him at Cheltenham where he's probably 80, 90% of his best and then 100% of his best at Leopardstown or thereabouts. He's just great for racing, isn't he?
I absolutely agree with that. It's fantastic. And we need to appreciate it because Not long ago, we had the album photo era of winning a couple of Gold Cups and just running once in a small race at Tremor before Cheltenham. So I love Galopin Des Champs. I absolutely agree with Don's analysis about that 110% finishing speed and why he dictated his own pace. And that you can understand why opponents didn't want to take it to him, make it a real stamina test, because he may have won even further. So it worked perfectly for Galopin Des Champs. He had the run of the race, but didn't have a really hard race with the rest of the season in mind. You still don't know how good he is, really, because if you think about a horse like Moscow Flyer, he DOS and beat 150 horse a couple of lengths, so needed the 180 horses like Azertip and Welchief to show how good he was. And Galopin Des Champs hasn't had such an elite level opponent yet. Perhaps he'd raise his game again if he did. I think about even money for the Gold Cup looks about right. He sets a mighty standard, and there are only 19 entries, but there are still quite a few promising stayers around who could challenge him if they go the right way. Fact File's the obvious one. He has done some too keen here, shifting a little to his right as usual. So I think he did quite well to get within 7.5 lengths. He's got a lot of speed, and as he showed when comfortably beating Galopin Des Champs in the John Durkan, but unless he relaxes, he's not going to turn the table at 3 miles, let alone an extended 3 miles too. So it's great that they're going to clash again in the Irish Gold Cup. Again, Willie running the two horses against each other. If they can get Fact File to settle, it'd be interesting to see whether he can lay a glove on Galopin. Willie seemed to be mulling over whether to try a hood and or earplugs. But history does give Fact File some hope. Of the 8 Gold Cup winners the Savills has produced since it became a Grade 1 in 2002, 4 of them, including 3 of the last 4, were beaten at Leopardstown. And all those 4 beat the Savills Chase winner at Cheltenham. It wasn't as if the Savills winner didn't run. So history suggests you shouldn't rule out Fact File turning the tables.
Okay, yeah, fascinating. We'll get that rematch hopefully in March, and there's obviously a lot of other horses there, and because of the lack of entries there is potential there for each way players looking down the markets, and maybe a couple of those horses and from the New Year's Day chase, Matt and Tremor under new sponsorship now, not the Savills, the O'Driscolls, I think it is. For you, give us an insight into what you thought of the race and maybe those couple of horses with a view to the Cheltenham Gold Cup.
Yeah, I mean, this was the perfect setup to see the good side of Embassy Gardens. Good record fresh, loves galloping on bad ground. It's a really good jumper and got a bit of a freebie out front here and was never really challenged. And that's probably just as well, as when he has to dig deep, he tends to spit the dummy. The most vivid example was when he was beaten by It's What Unites Us at Cork over hurdles. Got one crack and stopped immediately. So I wouldn't trust him in a battle, but he jumps and gallops, and he's the type to win more Grade 2 and 3 races when conditions suit, things don't get tough for him. Willie pointed out he's disappointed the last 2 festivals, wouldn't fancy him for the Gold Cup at all. Don and I have both been Monty Star fans for a while now. I had understood that Henry had deliberately not run him until now, although today's Racing Post, he said he didn't get a clear run going into Tremor, so he knew he'd need it. Now, whether that's a setback in the autumn or just not a clear run in the couple of weeks leading into the race, I'm not sure. Apparently looked fit enough in the ring. Things didn't go to plan. He was in a red hood beforehand, which surprised me. Can't remember him wearing one before. He certainly didn't have one amidst the hullabaloo of the festival last season in the Broadway. Perhaps he's been raring to go for a while. He was getting £6 to the winner, never really threatened at the business end. So are there positives to take out of it for Monty Star? I mean, he doesn't have a good record fresh, been beaten on all 5 seasonal debuts, but he's won twice, 26 and 29 days after the seasonal debut. He does look to improve a lot for his first run. Rachel didn't give him a real slog of a race, which may turn out to be crucial in the spring. Henry's been very open. There's only one day he'd be trained for, so it did look a bit of a blow the cobwebs away run. And the break to the Irish Gold Cup is a month, so perhaps he'll come on a lot for that. Galloping track at Leopardstown should suit him more than the sharp nature of Tremor. Manella Indo's 21.0 in the run-up to the meeting the year he won the Gold Cup, well punted into 10.0, as Henry's often are in the run-up to Cheltenham. So Monty Star could be one for momentum punters nearer the time. What worries me is I don't like Gold Cup horses running on heavy ground, especially in staying chases on their seasonal debut. And a stat here for you, since Imperial Call 1 in 1996, horses that have run on officially heavy ground that season, 0 from 101.
Shapers. And before I go to Don, you are the standing over the Classic Getaway fan club Matt, we're down another pound. We're down to 151. Is there any race you have in mind for him this year, next year, or is it just a work in progress with him constantly?
Yeah, maybe he didn't stay. He certainly didn't look to stay in the race last year when he got nailed by Jungle Boogie close home. So maybe a sort of 2.5 mile race, maybe something like the plate at the festival. Willie's never won a handicap chase, as is well known, but that's often because his horses, the young unexposed ones, are more openly campaigned with graded races in mind, so they don't end up well handicapped. Maybe a horse like this could be one who is well enough handicapped to win. I haven't quite given up yet.
Yeah, no, I'm constantly monitoring him as well. Don, Monty Star, there was a drift straight after the race. I think 26-ish 0.0, at least that's the price I saw. Only in one place, 21.0 now. So people have latched on, I think, based on Galopin des Champs and the entries, taking a lot of those extra horses away, perhaps. What did you make of the race from Monty Star point of view, purely?
I wasn't despondent totally, Dan, but he was getting £6 from Embassy Gardens as well. And I know it's a seasonal debut, and as Matt said, he does come on he came on quite appreciably for it last season for his chasing debut. You kind of ideally would have liked to see him just doing a wee bit better. That said, Embassy Gardens got a freebie in front, as Matt said. Michael O'Sullivan gave him a super ride. The finishing speed percent of 112% tells you that it wasn't a fast run race, and Embassy Gardens had a break on his rivals on the run down the back straight as well. So he had the perfect conditions under which to put up a good performance, and he did. In fairness to him, he did. He was good. He looked good. He was giving away weight as well to Monty Star. So it was a good performance by Embassy Gardens. But as Willie said afterwards, he's probably not a 3 mile, 2.5 furlong horse for all that he ran in the National Hunt Chase last season. He's probably more kind of 2 miles, 6 to 3 miles, that type of trip. But Monty Star, I definitely wouldn't give up hope on him. He should come on for this. He as Matt said, Henry said he didn't have a clear run into the race. And he's still an inexperienced horse. Like, he's only had 5 runs over fences. So there should be plenty more to come from him, you would have thought. Now, he does have to climb a little bit of a mountain if he's going to be a contender to beat Galopin des Champs, obviously. So the two things, the performance that Galopin des Champs put up, allied to Monty Star's defeat, that obviously hasn't enhanced his Gold Cup prospects. But he's still got plenty of potential upside to him. I'm sure he'll come on for that run. And yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how he goes now in the Irish Gold Cup.
Okay, we want to stick with you, Don, for the Champion Chase picture and talk about the 2 mile 1 furlong open chase at Leopardstown. And we mentioned Solness, and great performance, great ride from JJ Slevin. It's going to be the beaten horses that we're going to potentially look at here, but we can't obviously forget about a horse like Solness as well.
No, we can't. And fair play to Bronson Racing for having a go. They stumped up a fair supplementary fee to put him in the race. Joseph said afterwards he was looking at running with Dundalk, and then they supplemented him to the race. So why not? It's a difficult result to explain, isn't it? And for me, like as you said, super ride by JJ7. He set off on the outside. He lined up on the outside. He stayed to the outside. Solness jumps a wee bit to his right, but that wasn't a negative on the day. The better ground was probably around the outside. And look, he didn't get a solo up front, finishing speed percent of 104%. So it wasn't that they left him alone. He was able to dictate a walking pace. They went a good gallop. He beat Gaelic Warrior and Marine Nationale on merit. Gaelic Warrior obviously having his first run of the season. Marine Nationale, interestingly, he went around the inside for most of the way. He only moved to the outside around the home turn, and found that 50 went around the inside as well, and he ended up pulling up. So maybe Marine Nationale, like he has to improve again, obviously, to get up to the level of performance that he showed in winning the Supreme Novices Hurdle. But I wouldn't give up on him yet, and he does like the even better ground, better spring ground. That should help him as well. So again, he's a lightly raced horse. We know how good he was over hurdles. We know the regard in which Barry Connell holds him, and this was definitely a step forward from his seasonal debut. Gaelic Warrior will obviously come on for this. He might come on for stepping up and trip as well, and he was a little bit to his right as is his wont. And Solness, yeah, I'm not sure where they're going to go with Solness now. Like, I suppose he had a stone to find on official ratings or thereabouts, so he had to improve in this run to put up the performance that he did put up. It was a fantastic performance, brilliant day, brilliant week for Joseph O'Brien. But if there was a horse to take out of the race, for me, it's Marine Nationale.
Okay, and hit us with the trend, Matt, and maybe focus on Gaelic Warrior and Marine Nationale. So it's great to see Marine Nationale back, as Don alluded to there. Gaelic Warrior at Leopardstown, potential excuses there, and he did stay on well to get that second, because it didn't look for a long time that he was even going to get as close to the winner as ultimately he did, albeit he's beaten well in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trend I've got is one that gives some optimism for Gaelic Warrior, because it's whilst runners in the Champion Chase 3 from 39, 44% loss, two of those winners in the last 4 years are both Captain Guinness and Put the Kettle On were beaten at Leopardstown. And there was a great stat Tony Keenan put up that puts Gaelic Warrior's run into perspective. And that's coming into the Leopardstown meeting this time. Since 2008, Willie Mullins had 43 Grade 1 winners at the meeting, but he was 3 from 29 with horses returning from 100 days or more. And Underso and Shakhamswa twice were beaten, Mullins' favourites, on seasonal debut in this. So I wouldn't hold that against Gaelic Warrior. I'd expect him to come on a lot for this. And he did run on well later on. Now, whether that was the stamina kicking in or he blew up and ran on, I'm not sure. I definitely agree with what Don said about Marine Nationale going up the inside. Surprisingly, on the worst of the ground, even though the overall ground was decent, given his marked preference for good ground, I'm surprised he didn't go the Solness route. So it'd be interesting to see whether he runs better if he turns up in the Dublin Chase. Gaelic Warrior is a mercurial character, so I wouldn't want to conclude anything too quickly about him, but I want to see him run in the Dublin Chase. Just thinking about Willie's squad, there's question marks over the well-being of El Fabiolo. Ilete Tom is not entered the Champion Chase. If Energumene gets run over by John Bon Ascot on Saturday, as could easily happen, Willie may not have another Champion Chase contender. So I'd started the season thinking Gaelic Warrior was more likely to go for the Ryanair. I'm actually now beginning to think he's more likely to go for the Champion Chase. Inspired decision to supplement Solness, and agree with what Don said on that. The point I would add about, a lot of people are talking about how did he do that after the Tingle Creek? Well, the Tingle Creek time was the second slowest this century, less than a second quicker than John Bond's win on officially heavy ground the year before. So for those who like a sound surface like Solness, I think you can put a line through the Sandown run. It'll probably be his day in the sun, albeit the Champion Chase keeps falling apart. But if we did get a sound surface for the Champion Chase this year, he might be a place, maybe in the place market rather than the win market.
Yeah, and those couple of big horses, big price horses for the Champion Chase, Solness 26.0 at time recording, Marine Nationale, interesting runner 21.0, and Gaelic Warrior. I'm with Matt. Excuse me, I was with Ryanair at the start of the season, but I think the Champion Chase could open up for him versus John Bond, so 5.0 is the price on him for the Champion Chase. Let's move on to the Wayward Lad. Matt, stick with you, and you can do this with your trend and your thoughts on the race. Great battle for, maybe 2/3 of the race, but Sir Gino was so impressive here, and real coming of age performance that, put him at the top of the Arkle picture going into Cheltenham.
Oh, yeah, as someone who loves 2 mile chasing, especially seeing new horses come into the division, watching Sir Gino is fantastic. The trend is Wayward Lad has been a much better Arkle trial in recent years. First 6 Wayward Lad winners to run the Arkle, none did better than third. 5 of the last 9 to try since have won. All 5 were our favourite for the Arkle, so not a value betting angle. But punters sometimes underestimate 2 mile chase form at Kempton, the festival, because the tracks are so different. The old conditions race, Desert Orchid, was an excellent guide to the Champion Chase too. And since it became a 2 mile race, no horse beaten in the Wayward Lad has won the Arkle. So history suggests you shouldn't get lulled into thinking Ballyburn has a chance of turning the tables in the unlikely event they clash again. Now, this was because it was the classic example of 2 good novices. One who jumps like a 2 miler, one who jumps like a 3 miler. I'm very much learning still about how to use the new race IQ data. So I'd be cautious about taking too strong a view on this. They said he got 14 lengths jumping on Ballyburn, who finished 7.5 lengths behind him. Whether that means that they jumped equally well, Ballyburn would have won, I don't know. But using my eyes in the old-fashioned way, Sir Gino looked every inch an Arkle horse. Mistake at the first may have helped him. He was great after that. Good horses that jump well don't generally get tired over 2 miles. So the track advantage gain jumping was crucial. He didn't stop. Ballyburn had no chance to catch up. By contrast, at 3 miles or more, good horses often do finish tired. So jumping exuberantly is an inefficient use of energy. It's better say for the business end, especially if as is often the case in staying chases, horses rein back afterwards, forfeiting track advantage anyway. And there was a suspicion after his chasing debut at Punchestown that Ballaburn's jumping would mark him out as a 3-miler, as his pedigree does. Half-brother stacks of stayers, including Noble Endeavour, who's third in the Ultimate off 154. So I'd imagine he'll go for the 2 mile 5 grade 1 at DRF next. We'll know more about him as a chaser after that. So Gino sets a really good standard for the Arkle, albeit I don't think Balaburn was effective in the Wayward Lad. So some of the ratings, Racing Post ratings gave Sir Gino 166, I think are a bit inflated. Now, for those worrying about the record of the 5-year-olds in the Arkle, that record is between 1998 and 2007, 5-year-olds got between £4 and £8, 4 from 26, 46% profit. Since the allowance was abolished in 2008, only 11 5-year-olds have run in the 17 renewals. They've all been beaten. Fakir Dairies and Kruger over, the only ones to be placed. Now, this season, that's a trend I'd ignore. That's because I can't remember a season before where the previous season's juveniles have done so well. During the juvenile season, they largely run against each other. So the big early season races tell us a lot about how strong a cohort they are. There'd only been one 4-year-old win the Galway Hurdle since 2000. 2 ran this season. Nürburgring and Adawi finished 1-2. Carl Conti won the big handicap at Down Royal. Burdett rode the Greatwood. He might have finished close to Lossiemouth, but for losing his hind end at the last in the Christmas Hurdle. So Gino won the fighting 5th, only the second 4-year-old to do so since he became a Grade 1 20 years ago. So he looks terrific in blowing Balaburn away. I wouldn't let the poor record of 5-year-olds in the level weights Arkle put you off him or Matchbook at all.
Yeah, and of course they're top of the market, so a bit of context to trends, and as always. And incidentally, that race IQ data that people are starting to use in horse racing, I just see it as the new expected goals from football 5 years ago. When that was brought in, nobody was using that in their analysis, but I do feel in 5 years' time it'll be dominating a lot of analysis and helping people with their bets. We will see. Don, your thoughts on the race?
Yeah, look, not much to add to what Matt said, Dan. So Gino was brilliant. His jumping was super. It was a chasing debut, remember? So we heard that he'd schooled well, that he was a super jumper of fences, and that was borne out in his performance. He just may be a wee bit further ahead of Majborough in the market than he should be. Majborough, this was all high profile. It was Kempton at Christmas to Gino, real high profile horse after winning a fighting 5th, and all that he was drawn into the Constitution Hill narrative because he was going over fences. The Constitution Hill was back for the Christmas Hurdle. So I think that has all contributed to his price. And look, so Gino, superb horse. It would have been brilliant to see him against Majborough in the Triumph Hurdle last season. We didn't get to see it. But Majborough, he was very good in winning his beginner's chase as well. Now, Tullyhun and Asian Master, they were both beaten by Mr. Gift there the other day, so that didn't enhance that form, but he was good in winning. His jumping was very good. He did jump a bit to his left at a right-handed track, so that wasn't ideal. He should be seen to even better effect back on a left-handed track. Totally go along with what Matt was saying about 5-year-olds in an Arkle. Viper said it's the last 5-year-old winner, and he was getting an allowance. There's no allowance now, but as Matt said, not many have tried in the meantime. And the 5-year-olds this year, they're just a different bunch. They're very, very good. And you look, Majborough and Sir Gino, they dominate the market for the Arkle. I can see them dominating the race, but I just would have Majborough a wee bit closer to Sir Gino in the market than he is.
Okay, 4.5 at time of recording, if that's your sort of thing to maybe have a think about. Cotto Star novice chase. Matt, hit us with your trend and your thoughts on the rate. The Jukebox Man, split an opinion on how well he's done so far. Some people absolutely love him, think he's a lock for the Brown for the Broadway or Brown Advisory, and others not so sure.
Yeah, I really like him as a horse, but the trend isn't promising. Since its inception in 1975, 23 quarter-star winners have run in the Broadway, and they've all been beaten. The last quarter-star winner to be placed was Long Run 15 years ago, and 6 have tried since. This wasn't a strong-looking renewal. Jukebox Man jumped and travelled, did shift a little bit to his left on occasions, especially at the last, but not as much as at the business end at Newbury. He's a good jumper on both a long and a short stride. He wasn't as exuberant as at Newbury, popped away more like the stayer they want him to be, which is a good sign. He's a classy horse who was mugged in the Albert Bartlett last season. 6.0 looks about right for the Broadway. As I said, he's a horse I like, but 2 related things stop me getting involved. It's that record of quarter-star winners. But it's he has stamina to prove. They went unusually steadily in this with a finishing speed of over 115%. So that doesn't mean the Jukebox Man can't win, But this is a very much a test at Kempton of jumping at speed. The Broadway tends to be much more a test of stamina and often rewards a more economical jumping style, more typical staying chasers jumping style. And he's a quick horse by Broadway standards. Now, with the Turner's National Hunt chase options gone now, the Broadway really should be more competitive. It might again become the strong stamina test it used to be with bigger fields, especially as the ground's often testing now. That would be the concern with him. He looked shorter in the Albert Bartlett last year, didn't quite get home. Ben says he goes straight to the festival. I like Broadway horses to have plenty of match practice. And whilst both his chase starts have been in graded races, so he should have learnt plenty from them. 2 chase starts, not ideal. And there is a risk he'd be keen, having been off since Christmas. So whilst I still really like him as a horse, just wonder whether he's going to be seen to best effect at the festival this year.
Okay, yeah, might buy probably the only horse I can think of, obviously falling at the last of the Cato Star, but ended up winning the Broadway. Don, your thoughts on the race?
Yeah, interesting. They didn't go fast at all, and that said, the finishing sweep percent was 115%. But the Jukebox man, he showed an awful lot of pace. His again, back to race IQ, his final 4 furlongs were faster than any other horse at Kempton over the 2 days, which is interesting for a 3-mile race. Okay, albeit they didn't go quick early on, and that facilitated a quick finish. But he was faster even than Constitution Hill was, racing over 2 miles over hurdles for the last 4 furlongs. So significant. But look, he had to feel for him in the Albert Bartlett hurdle last season. If there was a Turner's chase still there, then that would probably be the race for him. But yeah, I echo Matt's sentiments about the Broadway, which is a test of stamina more than a test of pace, whereas the Cato Star can be a test of pace, especially given that they didn't go quick early on in a small field. And he's only ever raced against 9 rivals over fences in total. So yeah, just maybe tread a wee bit warily with the view to the Broadway chase in mind.
Okay, and Matt, we're going to go to the Killiney here. Hit us with your trend and your thoughts on the race that we have.
Trend is that runners are 9 from 41 in the festival. Quite an impressive strike rate. None went off bigger than 10.0, so generally well fancied. You made a small profit backing them. Lecky Watson's a fascinating horse, trying to analyse the festival. I think he's a bit of a lummox. He's always had lots of talent, but hasn't always harnessed it. Never won in 5 bumpers, yet managed to finish 4th in the champion bumper at 81.0. Willie said last year, after he was 3rd to Reed and Tommy run the Grade 1 at Nace, he wanted to get more experience into Lecky Watson for the Albert Bartlett, because he's still very much learning his trade. Didn't manage to do it. Looked a bit more mature this season, still far from the finished article. Yeah, backed off the first here, jumped to his right at a few fences. Quite a serious mistake, 6 out, not fluent 2 out. Looked to land on all 4s at the last. Paul said he was a bit leery, looking around. But he had the ability to get away with it against a decent horse in down memory lane, but the runner-up made a mistake at the last 2. And Lecky Watson's one of those horses I look at and say, surely he can't win a Broadway, just won't be professional enough. That's probably going to prove to be the case. Every so often, one of these talented, seeming work in progress horses puts it all together to win. 17.0 looks about right. Down memory lane's probably just a bit below Grade 1 level. Might be hard to place now as he's shown his hand a bit to the handicapper. He doesn't have a rating yet, but I think he'd be not far short of 150. So if he turned up in the 2 mile 4 novice handicap chase at the festival, probably be racing some against some plots there. The interesting one from a handicap perspective was Farron Glory. I'm not sure up until now he'd been taking to fences, but yeah, he is a Royal Bomb winner last season. Gordon said at the time he was a 3 mile chaser in the making. He jumped ordinarily again early on. Fencing did get better as the race went on. Looks as if he's going to be right in the mix as they travelled between the last 2. Wasn't given a hard time. He's got an Irish mark of 140 over fences now, £6 below his hurdles mark. BHA handicapper typically puts the Irish chasers up about £2 to £3, albeit a novice, especially one trained by Gordon Elliott, may get a bit more. He's qualified for the non-novice handicap chases now, having had 4 chase starts. So he might squeeze into the 0 to 145 Kim Muir. This extended 2 mile 3 is the furthest he's run over in 4 chase starts. But Gordon produced Mount Ida and Milan Native to win as novices, not having run beyond intermediate trips. So I'm in 2 minds about him. He's one for the long list for the Kim Muir.
Yeah, Don, what's your thoughts on the race? Lecky Watson a talking horse, believe it or not, on Twitter, just in terms of exactly what Matt's saying. You know, is he a little bit overpriced or underestimating a Broadway from maybe a place perspective? And also down the field, there are a couple of horses that could potentially their day focused maybe on another day in a big handicap, as Matt alluded to there as well.
Yeah, interesting thoughts on that. And Foreign Glory's got a rating of 140. He's rated 146 over hurdles. So if you got into a Kimura of 145 or lower, then that would be interesting, all right. For all that he does have to prove his stamina. Lecky Watson, yeah, like for me, he's always been a stamina horse. Like he ran in the Albert Bartlett hurdle last season. He finished fourth in the Champion Bumper behind a Dream to Share at a massive price. He stayed on to take fourth place that day. And yeah, like he won over 2.5. He beat Slade Stale over 2.5 on his debut. For me, he won through stamina. He stayed on well. He outstayed down memory lane on Sunday. So yeah, he's an improving horse. He's got a rating over fences now. He's rated £9 higher over fences than he was over hurdles, or than he is over hurdles. So and that's after just 2 runs. So he's probably going to have to step forward again. But I think maybe like the fact that he's been to Cheltenham and back and run well there, that's a positive, obviously, in the context of the Broadway. And I think a step up and trip would help him. I think he'll be better over 3 miles than he is over 2.5. So he's definitely one to keep in mind. Down memory lane, I think Ruby mentioned it on the day. I think he's going to be a better horse on better ground as well. Like all his best form is on better ground. He won his maiden hurdle at Down Royal on soft, but in deeper company, his best runs have been on better ground. He won his Bumper on yielding. He beat King of Kingsfield at Navan on yielding ground, and then when he finished third in the Henry VIII Chase at Sandown, that was on soft ground, as Matt mentioned earlier on. It was in the context of the Tingle Creek. It was on Tingle Creek Chase then. He just never jumped. You just have to put a line through that for him. His dam, Credo Star, she was a good mare over 2 and 2.5 miles for Peter Fahey, and her best form was on good and kind of yielding ground. So I think down memory lane, there could be more to come from him over on better ground. And I think dropping back down to 2 miles should suit him as well. Like for me, he's a pacey horse. Like he got well beaten in that 2 mile novice hurdle, the one that Caldwell Potter won at Leopardstown last Christmas. That was on really bottomless ground. But I think 2 miles good ground, that could see him in a much better light.
Okay, fascinating thoughts on those 4 runners there. We'll move on to, we're effectively at the eye catcher section now, but we're going to start with you, Matt. You're going to give us your thoughts on the Fahey Novices Chase, give us a trend and your thoughts on the race, as I said, and then we'll lead into Don's first eye catcher.
Yeah, this race provided my favourite moment of the festive season. A reminder, even the smartest people can say things that aren't very sensible, especially when something's upset them. The race itself, pretty straightforward. Odds on in Perry Pass, jumped pretty well, be a bit right at the business end, winning easily. The bear form isn't stratospheric, but it's decent. He got the job done in good style. As Willie said afterwards, he was much the fastest horse in this 2 mile 3 race. And he was ridden to use his 2 mile speed by Daryl Jacob. An excellent last big race ride from him. With a finishing speed of 113%, the race was very much suiting the speedy Imperi Pass. Afterwards, Fran Berry suggested he was briefly outpaced. Daryl Jacob adamant that's not the case. Rather, he just gets a bit lazy mid-race. Perhaps blinkers or cheek pieces would help keep his mind on the job, especially if he drops back to 2 miles. Now, that seems unlikely because the interview Willie Mullins gave afterwards was box office viewing. Okay? There's no race for him at Cheltenham. He's a 2.5 miler specialist. That's why he's at Limerick. The Faheen is a race for 2.5 mile specialists who aren't effective at 2 miles. So Imperi Pass then go on to the 2.5 race at DRF, bypass Cheltenham for Aintree or Fairyhouse. Now I've got a question for you, lads. Can you remember which 2 horses fought out the finish of last season's Faheen?
I don't remember what I had for breakfast, not to mind. Oh yeah, it was the Patrick Mullins, Danny Mullins race, wasn't it?
Oh,
yeah, that's right.
Yes.
So the 2 who fought it out were Gaelic Warrior and Elete Tom. And last season there was a 2 mile 4 Grade 1 at the Cheltenham Festival, and neither of those 2 intermediate trip specialists ran in the Turners. They finished 1st and 3rd in the Arkle. And the trend is that the Faheen runners overall in the Arkle finished 7, 2, 1, 3. You look at Gaelic Warrior, all his chase starts before the Arkle were over intermediate trips. His last hurdles run was a win over 3 miles. By contrast, Imperi Pass recorded an RPR of 163 when 3.25 lengths second to State Man here at Christmas last season over 2 miles. Very few chasers have that sort of pace. Those who do have a great record in the Arkle Since 2002, 20 horses have run in the Arkle, having recorded a hurdles RPR of 160 plus the previous season. 10 have won, 46% profit. And to put Impere Pass's 163 hurdles rating over 2 miles in context, it's £7 higher than Sergino got for winning the Fighting Fifth a few weeks ago. Impere Pass jumps fences pretty slickly. He is an Arkle contender. If he were trained by Henry de Bromhead or Alan King, or pretty much anyone else, he'd be trained as one. I'm hoping when tempers have calmed over the changes that things will settle and Impere Pass will be given the chance to show whether or not he can jump at 2 miles speed. And I wouldn't count on it. And just for the avoidance of doubt, I haven't had a penny on him anti-post.
Yeah, he's 26.0 now for the Arkle, and as it seems, he is likely to go DRF and miss Cheltenham altogether for Aintree or later on in the season. Don, the horse that came second to him, Jordan's Joseph O'Brien, had a great Christmas. When we see trainers like that sometimes have a great period of the year, is it hard for them to continue that success throughout the season, or can they sort of row it back and then bring out again? Like, I'm thinking of trainers like Joseph O'Brien, Gavin Cromwell, Henry de Bromhead, that sort of thing, who find good collective of form at certain points of the year.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Dan, and probably tend to be a bit more forgiving of horses who run or who get beaten when trainers' horses are generally not in form. I don't anyway tend to do the opposite and tend to mark down horses who've run from yards that are in form. And Joseph O'Brien had a fantastic Christmas, as we said earlier. I think Jordan was the only horse he ran in the Grade 1 who was beaten, and he finished second behind Impere Pass. And I thought Jordan's did well to get as close as he did. He did plenty wrong. His jumping wasn't good. He wasn't fluent over his fences. And back to the race IQ data, he was minus 0.98 in terms of lengths gain jumping. Impere Pass was plus 4.04. So he lost whatever net over 5 lengths on Impere Pass in theory for his jumping. He was beaten 4, but more than that, it just kind of got him out of his rhythm. And he did move up, and he looked like it was going to be a threat to Impere Pass on the run to the second last. But again, I think off a slow pace, 112 finishing speed percent, that probably told in the fact that he had to make up the ground on a top class horse like Impere Pass. But I wouldn't give up on Jordan's. He was unlucky to unseat in the Craddockstown Chase. Facile Mode kind of cannoned into him, and he was unseated early on in the race. But he won the Grade 3 then next time, and this was a step forward from him on what he's done so far. He's only had 6 runs over fences, and I think he can come forward again. He's got a handicap rating now of 145 over fences. So look, while this is a Grade 1 race and he's not far off Grade 1 company, I think if they want to go down a handicap route, then a mark of 105 would be an interesting mark for him. And if he can just maybe improve his fluency over his fences, then he could take a good step forward. Like, he's only just turned 6, so he's still a young horse. He's got plenty of time on his side as well. So I just keep Jordan's in mind for whatever they're going to run him in next.
Yeah, and Joseph O'Brien, who knows? We tend to keep it to 3 eye catchers each. That will vary from show to show, of course. So you've 2 other eye catchers, starting with First Street, Don. Yeah,
First Street finished 4th in the novices handicap chase at Kempton on the first. It was the first race on the first day, actually, on St. Stephen's Day. I thought he did well. Again, he was held up early on off a sedate pace. He was about 8 lengths behind, leaving the back straight. He was fastest through each of the final 2 furlongs, and he was a classy hurdler. He finished second behind Stateman in his county hurdle, when I think he was giving him a pound, or getting a pound from Stateman. He reached a peak rating over hurdles of 152. He's now rated 128 over fences. They dropped him again a little bit for this run at Kempton, and even that, it's way lower than his peak rating, but it's even lower than his current hurdles rating of 136. So he's 8 pounds lower. This day last year, or on Stephen's Day last year, he finished 3rd behind Constitution Hill and Rubo in the Christmas hurdle, and this was only his 4th run over fences. So you'd expect that he will improve again for it. He's only 7, even though he's had plenty of running. He's still only 7. Sorry, he's just turned 8. But he jumps a wee bit to his left as well, so he might be better on a left-handed track. Newbury and Cheltenham, he's got good form at Newbury and Cheltenham. So I think a return to Newbury or Cheltenham, that would see him in a better light. And he's got form over 2 miles, but this 2.5 mile trip held up. He did see it out well, and I think this a 2.5 mile trip would suit him well. Maybe off a stronger pace, or maybe ridden a wee bit closer to it. Then I think he's an interestingly handicapped horse now. Nicky Henderson's And my third horse, Dan, is Better Days Ahead. We didn't see a whole lot of the Fort Leany chase in which Croke Park beat him, but going into the fog, it looked like he was travelling a wee bit better than Croke Park, his stable companion. Coming out of it, he wasn't travelling as well, and he was playing catch up. We don't know how they jumped the second last fence. I'm presuming that he probably didn't jump it as well as Croke Park did. Maybe not. Maybe he just got outpaced from Croke Park, quickened in front of him. But look, there isn't much between these two Gordon Elliott horses. Croke Park was the Drinmore Chase winner. I thought he got a super ride from Sam Ewing to win that day from the front over 2.5 miles. A trip probably short of his best. And for me, Croke Park stepped forward, stepping up in trip to 3 miles. But Better Days Ahead stepped forward again. And in another couple of strides, he'd have beaten Croke Park. He was staying on best of all. It's only his second run over fences. He was impressive in beating Slade Steel in his first run. And back to the Martin Pipe hurdle that we were talking about earlier on. He won that last year. And he definitely won it through stamina. Whatever about Banbridge, it was stamina that won the race for him, because he didn't look like the most likely winner turning for home. He was over on the far side. Waterford Whispers and Kay de Bourbon were over on the near side. Answer to Cape was in the race as well. In the first 4, they finished clear of their rivals. It was a real staying performance by Better Days Ahead to win that day, and that was 2.5 miles. He should be better even stepping up in trip. And as we mentioned earlier, the Martin Pipe hurdle can be a really good pointer to staying chasers of the future. And Better Days Ahead, okay, the Martin Pipe hurdle, it's a handicap. It's a good handicap and it's a good pointer, but it is a handicap. But he proved the next time when he finished third behind Dancing City at the Punchestown Festival that he could operate at Grade 1 level as well. They didn't go at a fast pace in that Punchestown race either, and he was staying on at the end. So it's all pointed to the fact that he's a stamina horse. So yeah, and the fact that he's got Cheltenham Festival winning form as well. It's all positive in the context of where he's going. And I think the Brown Advisory Chase, the Broadway Chase, is a logical target for him. And yeah, I think he can be a big player in that race.
Yeah, could be overpriced 17.0. And Matt, we've seen that Martin Pipe. It's a great way to finish the festival, I think, the last few years since it's become the last race. But it just keeps producing really, really strong. The top 3 or 4 horses tend to become Grade 1 horses, or at least competing at Grade 1 level. Give us your thoughts on the novice chase, the 3 mile novice chase at Leopardstown, the Better Days Ahead lost to Croke Park, and then you can start on your eye catchers.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Don said. Better Days Ahead is a horse I've always liked to manage to get him for the Martin Pipe last year. And as you said, Daniel, that is a real race that throws up Grade 1 staying chasers and even novice staying hurdlers for the rest of the spring. He did hang in behind Croke Park a bit on the run-in here. He was past him fairly quickly beyond the line. So don't know quite why that was. Be interesting to see where he goes next and the run up to the Broadway. But they're the sort of horses who might be a bit underestimated. Everyone's keen to knock Croke Park, but he's won 2 Grade 1s. He's quite a big price given that. I tend to go with a consensus that he's probably not going to quite be good enough. He just doesn't look to have that wow factor. Better Days Ahead might easily improve past him if that hanging in behind was just a one-off. So they're definitely 2 for the notebook. My eye catchers are, firstly, no flies on him. He beaten Django Bay and Willie the Builder in a point, real buzz horse last season, after winning the 4-year-old 2 mile maiden at Leopardstown on St Stephen's Day. He was price-wise his anti-pace selection of the Supreme, then looked to get stuck in the mud a couple of runs, bombed at Punchestown. Despite having a hurdles rating of 135, he went off 34.0 and then 51.0. Beginners won by down memory lane near Lantique. Never cited in either. Ran in the 2 mile 1 beginners at Leopardstown at Christmas, again 51.0. Now the favourite got injured and it was won by 151 shot Jeannot Lapin. So it may have been a weak beginner's chase for Leopardstown at Christmas. But the way it panned out, there was no way to avoid no flies on him becoming a real eye catcher. Staying on 7 lengths third, seeming to finish with plenty of running left. He's eligible for the novice handicap chase at the festival now. 1 more run to be eligible for the open handicap chases. He was on plenty of punters' horses to follow lists at the start of the season. May have fallen off the radar after no-shows in his first 2 starts over fences. Despite being by Western, he may prefer the sound surface he had here. At this stage, I wouldn't even try and second guess which handicap the Coups plan for. May not be Cheltenham, but he's shaped with lots of promise here. If he is going to go to Cheltenham, probably do him good to get his head in front in a February level beginners next month. So keep an eye on that. The second is Big Interest. He's only just turned 6 and was having his first start under rules after 2 points. and he won the big Hunter at Down Royal on Stephen's Day, beating last season's top hunter. It's on the line. First winner of this on rules debut since 2004. Took big interest a while to adapt to the regulation fences. Jumped better as the race went on. Won easily. Now, It's on the Line doesn't have a great record fresh. Wouldn't have been that fit for this. Staying on for a never dangerous 4 3/4 length second. So you wouldn't take the form literally. You wouldn't be confident big interest to confirm the form. But it was still an excellent rules debut. And when Ferns Lock was a buzz young hunter a couple of years ago, David Christie was keen to give him a season hunting, take him to Cheltenham the following season because he was immature. Christie seems more open-minded about big interest. He's looking at Nace in February. That's the hunter that It's on the Line won last year. So I'll be more open-minded, see what comes after that. If he beats him again, then the lure of Cheltenham may become irresistible. Capo Bleu on the Fox Hunter on rules debut after 6 points. Kingscliff off 103 points. So it can be one off very little experience. Whether he's ready for the festival this season or not, big interest looks a hunter to follow. And finally, Mr. Giff. It's not often you get a hot beginners in Ireland at around the minimum trip where the winner comes from well off the pace. And that's what happened at Fairyhouse on Saturday. Mr. Giff made up plenty of ground to run down Tully Hill in the 2 mile 1 beginners. He'd been a very buzzy type over hurdles. JJ Slevin said Fences made him just back off a bit more, settle better. And he jumped well bar a mistake 3 out. He was valued for a fair bit more than the winning margin of a length and 3/4. And it wasn't as if they went too quickly in front. Tully Hill accelerated from 26 to 32 miles an hour on the run-in. He just got done by a faster and straighter jumping horse. And Mr. Giff was 7.5 lengths fifth in the Supreme. May not have got home when beaten over an intermediate trip at Punchestown. He does look a 2 miler at this early stage. He's not in the Irish Arkle. There is a supplementary stage on the 28th. For Cheltenham, in an Arkle market that lacks depth behind Sergino and Majborough, who look a cut above the others at this stage, he's an interesting long shot. He's about 70.0 on the Matchbook Exchange. And perhaps the reason Connection's so reluctant to aim in Pere Pass at the Arkle is they know they've got one that's even better.
Okay, yeah. So we 3 eye catchers there. No flies on him. Big interest. Mr. Gift for Matt, and Don. Better days ahead. First Street and Jordan's. That's in reverse order to why he said it. We will have a couple of questions and have time for a couple of questions. Question from Tony Mahoney, who says from on YouTube, so do get your questions in either on social. You can DM myself or Matt on Twitter /X, or you can leave us a comment on YouTube. And he's basically saying which race course apart from Cheltenham has the best record of producing winners at the festival on their most recent run. Also, which course is the poorest record and what percentage of winners have run at the previous festival. Matt, you have a small bit of analysis on this question.
Yeah, the first 2 questions are fairly straightforward. The first one's Leopardstown because of DRF. The second one is there are lots of courses that wouldn't have had a winner prep there this century. The last question, there's a little more on that. The percentage of winners that have run at a previous festival varies hugely between races. By definition, it's 0 in the Triumph. In the 4 championship races, it's 88%. By that time, especially in the 2 championship chases, they've had plenty of opportunities. If you've got a horse that's good enough to win a championship event, they've probably run in a novice race at the festival before. By contrast, in the 3 Grade 1 novice hurdles, in practice, it's basically just those who run in the bumper. Theoretically, you could have a second season novice who ran in a juvenile or a novice at the festival the previous year, winning. Salvatore Mundy's an example this year. He's actually a 3rd season novice. 16% of runners in the Grade 1 novice hurdles have run at the festival previously, all in the bumper. So overall, festival experience, generally a big plus. Perhaps in the handicaps, a good festival run can leave you exposed. When the festival's on goodish ground, then well-run races at the previous festival are often a better guide than steadily run soft ground races over the winter. With testing ground the norm at the festival now, it's less of an angle. But if you do get a sound surface this year, then that's definitely something to be looking at.
Yeah, Don, I guess the DRF has made it that first question anyway, a lot easier to answer. It gives us Leopardstown probably being the best guide. Similar-ish courses, albeit there are nuances to the differences.
Yeah, I guess there are a few differences in the tracks, but yeah, look, it's I guess the advent of the Dublin Racing Festival, allied to the fact that Irish horses have become as strong as they are, that makes Leopardstown a massive pointer towards the Cheltenham Festival. I think there was 1 year, maybe it was 3 years ago, when there wasn't that great a strike rate. But I think, outside of that, for the last whatever number of years the Dublin Racing Festival was going, it's been a massive pointer to Cheltenham.
Okay, and we have another question here. I'll go to Don first. Robert Hulley on YouTube, and we had a couple of people, because both Matt and Don are very supportive of the changes, as I would say the majority. But do you see an argument for potentially reducing the Broadway to 2 miles 6 furlongs, Don? And on the back of that, we got some other questions saying people aren't 100% sure that these changes are necessarily good in the long term for the Cheltenham Festival, with horses that could have been, like Imperial Pass that we discussed, maybe skipping the 2.5 mile and missing the festival altogether. What are your overall thoughts on those couple of points?
Yeah, I mentioned that before. Django Bay is another horse, 2.5 miler maybe. And there are options. There's the Manifesto Chase at Aintree, there's the Willow Worm Gold Cup at Fairy House. So there are options close enough to Cheltenham for trainers or owners if they want to do that. I think in general the changes in general, the 6 main changes to the Cheltenham Festival, if you had to take all of them together or leave all of them behind, I'd take all of them together. I think in general, on average, in the main, they're positive. For the reasons that we discussed last week, I think there are 1 or 2 changes that I wouldn't have made, but look, it had to be changed because it wasn't going the right way. So I think we need to see how it pans out this year. And the removal of the 2.5 mile chase, for all that, you kind of see a horse like a Imperial Pass, and you say he's made for the 2.5 mile chase at Cheltenham. Matt obviously doesn't agree with that, but you think that that's the natural race for him, and then you're thinking, or you're hearing that he might not even go. Then you think, oh God, if only there was a 2.5 mile chase. And I remember when Native Upmanship kept on running in at Cheltenham over the wrong trip, he was a quintessential 2.5 mile horse. I think the Ryanair only came in when he was 11 or maybe 12, so too late for him because he could have won 3 Ryanairs. But look, I think that the removal of the turners, it does shoehorn those horses. The removal of the turners, plus the changes in the National Hunt Chase from a Grade 2 race, effectively as it was, to a 0-145 handicap, that's shoehorned the top novice into the 2 mile race or the 3 mile race. And I think that, in terms of competition, and that's what we want at Cheltenham, that's a positive. The reduction in the Broadway Chase to 2 miles 6, no, I don't think that would be a good move. I think 2 mile, 3 mile, they're the right novice races now.
Well, even better days ahead in Crow Park, they could both be National Hunt Chase horses and would have been a great battle, good race. But now we have them as both 17.0 shots in the Broadway. Let's see if they end up going there. Man, on to you for that. And I guess, like, if Imperial Pass does skip the festival, it makes those races at Aintree, Punchestown, bigger races, and I think that's not good for the Cheltenham Festival and that week, but I think in the overall picture that can only be a good thing as well. Well, I not that we want every single good horse obviously skipping the biggest festival of the season.
No, this has always happened, didn't it? I mean, Spillane's Tower deliberately skipped Cheltenham when there was the 2.5 mile race. Last year went to Fairy House. Paul Nicholls often takes his best novices to Aintree. So this always happened. I just hope that when it does happen, it's because those horses are not suited by going to Cheltenham rather than sulking. On the 2 mile 6 option for the Broadway, I mean, back in the pre-Turners days, when it tended to attract a bigger field, there were some trainers who didn't run their best aim. I was arguing at bottomed horses. In the 14 Turners era renewals, the average field size 9.9, 14 immediately before that 12.4, so 25% bigger. And small fields and a steadier gallop meant we haven't heard that issue raised in the Broadway in recent years. So if we do get a stronger gallop and bigger fields and trainers raise that concern again, then I'd look at it, but only then. I'm a bit old school. To me, 2 miles and 3 miles are the championship distances, with the Gold Cup as a unique test. So I prefer the Arkle and Broadway to stay as is. That said, if they don't support the Arkle and Broadway this season, looking at what the BHA have done with the novice chase programme over the main season, they may reduce the number of novice chases from 2 to 1, in which case an intermediate trip would be ideal.
Yeah, that's true. Get everyone involved there. Oh, what a race that would be. Matt, final one for you both, but the same question as last year from Trevor Clark. A nice easy one. Give 2 horses you're looking for handicaps, particularly the Kim Muir. Now, we've already mentioned the Kim Muir horse, Far and Glory, wasn't it? So anything else sticking to mind, or maybe just general thoughts on the handicaps for people looking at this stage? Because people say, because the weights aren't out, you shouldn't be looking at the handicaps, but the markets are there. Give people, an idea in their heads, and you don't stop thinking about these races for 12 months. So I'm sure you have a few on the long list for handicaps. Yeah,
and I do think it's different races. So roughly the way I approach it is there's one race I start now looking at before the entries come out, and that's the Potence final. There are so few qualifiers, 4 per race, that it's a manageable number. So I have a spreadsheet and have them all in as the qualifiers go on. and I might have a bet before then. I talked about Feet of a Dancer as an eye catcher last week. Then there are races I look at when the entries come out. The Ultima is the obvious one of those, because that's almost always won by a British horse, and therefore it's not so important to get the weights of the Irish horses. The majority of the races, I then look when the weights come out the following week, because then you can assess what the Irish horses have actually got. And the more predictable races, and the Novice Handicap Chase, for example, is a very predictable race. Those at that stage. And then there are races I tend to leave until declarations, the really unpredictable races like the Grand Annual, because horses that are big prices tend to be defensively priced anti-post. And so you often get a bigger price on the day. So that's my kind of starting point. It always ends up a bit different because of the specific renewal you're talking about. So I mentioned Farron Glory earlier. One other to think about, and this is this new race, the 0 to 145 handicap version of the National Hunt Chase. Likely to be one of the harder handicaps, I think, because it's a new race. Not just a new race at the festival. Novice handicap chases over marathons trips are like hen's teeth. I'm anticipating a much bigger field than the 7, 10, 6 runners, the last 3 renewals, the level weights version. Could lead to a less sedate gallop. Stamina could be more of a premium. And Gordon Elliott entered Thorough Stayer Search for Glory at Cheltenham in the autumn, got a rating of 145. Been a close second in the Florida Pearl and third in the Faheen since. Top chase RPR 140, had his 3 chase starts to qualify. So if the BHA handicapper won't race him for those 2 graded runs, he could be the right type for this. 17.0 in embryonic markets. Do be careful anti-post. You don't get your money back if a horse is entered and the handicapper says they're above the ceiling. I'm a long way from having a bet in this yet, but I imagine that Search for Glory will be on my shortlist.
Yeah, Don, I guess finally to you, like even a meeting like yesterday, a punch this time, there's always eye catchers, there's always the notebook. I'm sure that you're constantly thinking not just of the Cheltenham, but just later races in the year for beaten horses in particular.
Yeah, look, I have a spreadsheet full to the brim of horses who under certain conditions might be of interest depending on how they're priced up, etc., etc. But I mentioned First Street already today. I'm not sure if he'd get into the Novice Handicap Chase. It's an open handicap, or it's a limited handicap, but there's no upper rating on it. So he's got a rating of 128. I just think he's a well handicapped horse, and wherever he goes, and if that's a Cheltenham, then good. Deep Cave as well, I mentioned last week. If he got to qualify for Pertemps final, then he'd be interesting. I think he's a well handicapped horse, a potentially well handicapped staying hurdler of Christian Williams, whose horses tend to come into form around February, March, April time. Okay,
lot for the tracker there, and pay particular close attention to the guys' eye catchers throughout the series. Matt gave it a good plug in episode 1 of this series about last year's performances, but a lot of good horses put up there from not just Cheltenham races, beyond that. But my thanks to Matt and Don. Longer episode than usual, but we'd a lot to cover there. So next week we'll be looking ahead. We have 1 more week where we're going to start the review of the Clarence House, that sort of thing, and then we'll have the Dublin Racing Festival preview, then the review the following week. And before you know it, it's going to be the Cheltenham Festival all over again. Enjoy the week's content on the Matchbook podcast feed, and we'll be back same time, same place in your podcast feed for Tuesday lunchtime, and every Tuesday lunchtime leading up to the festival. Bye-bye.